We are talking silver price manipulation today, and my guest today is Keith Neumeyer. He is the CEO of First Majestic, a Canadian miner with operations in Mexico, and probably one of the most vocal CEOs in the silver space. Keith, good to see you again. Welcome to the show here at Stansberry Research.
Well, it's very nice seeing you, Daniela. It's my first time on your program, and I know you've been getting a lot of congratulations, and but I know it's been a huge year for you and lots of changes for you in your life, and great to see.
Thank you, Keith. Yes, lots of changes indeed, but love having people like yourself on the show and really going more in depth in some of these conversations that people really want to learn more about. So we saw the settlement, JP Morgan paying close to $1 billion for market manipulation involving precious metals. You've been very vocal about it, right? It's a huge number here. My first question to you is, do you feel more confident that going forward, they've learned their lesson? And I'm not just putting JP Morgan in this, but other banks.
Yeah, well, just talking about JP Morgan for a sec, I think it's the fifth criminal charge now, under the current management team, running JP Morgan. And that in itself is pretty shocking for any one bank. The other banks, of course, Scotia or HSBC or, you name it. There's been multiple other banks that have been, tied into this whole manipulation scheme of silver and gold. And yeah, I do think it's going to end. I think, the management teams and the board of directors, they see this, they see the newspapers, and they know what's going on out there. And they're just simply, in my opinion, I'm not, of course, on a board of a bank, but, if I was on the board of directors of any of these banks, I'd make sure, I personally shut it down.
And I guess, Keith, the question on most investors' minds, and a lot of emails I get is, if the market is manipulated, and I'm talking precious metals here, what's the point of being in it? How do you invest in a market that's manipulated? Why should I be in silver?
Yeah, I think, there's a few people like myself of the view that, eventually this system's going to crack and it's like an elastic band, it's been held down for so long and eventually it's just going to snap. And I'm looking for, much higher prices in the metals. The supply demand fundamentals for silver are just astronomical. I was looking at some automobile stats just the other day, and the demands for this metal is just, absolutely outstanding and or crazy. And we can talk a little bit about numbers if you want, but I just think that the supply demand fundamentals to the silver itself are just going to get so overwhelmed that it'll break any bank that wants to be on the short side.
Interesting. Okay, so I do want to go more in depth on that now, Keith. So let's talk about the demand. Okay, if we talk silver coins, I was on the US Mint site the other day, and I'm looking at price ranges on silver products, with total pricing increases ranging from $9.50 to $75. So crazy increases here on silver products.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's mind-boggling. What do you make of these premiums?
Well, it tells me that there's something wrong in the system. When spot is half the price of what the U.S. Mint is selling coins for, that tells you there's a huge supply problem. And, I've been in discussions with many mints, and I don't want to be naming names on the air, but, I know who these mints are, and I know they're absolutely the end of their wits. They just can't supply the demand that's currently out there. And, we see it now showing up at the U.S. Mint, and it really, I have to look at what First Majestic is doing because, I think our premiums are quite high. I think we're selling right now at $28, an ounce. So that's about, $3.50 or so over current spot prices. And I'm going to really rethink this because maybe we should be also raising our premiums because, if we decided to sell unlimited amounts of ounces, we have a limit right now for our retail investors for 100 ounces per month. And if we took that limit off, we'd be wiped out of our inventories. And we do that specifically to prevent, one person gobbling up our entire inventory supply. And, but now, with this, it's just an interesting thing we really have to look at.
So that's a serious move. You're considering increasing your premiums as well?
Absolutely. I think, I remember, back in March, when the silver price dropped the way it did, down to 13, we stopped at $18 an ounce on the website. And then all of a sudden our sales just went through the roof and we were quite surprised that the sales spiked the way they did. And then we backed up the premiums all the way to $20 right away. And we actually, for a time there, we're selling silver for $30 an ounce and still selling plenty of ounces.
Why do you think there's such a hunger for silver?
Well, I think people are waking up. My thesis, and you and I have had many, many talks under your prior, company, and there is a big dispute out there. Well, how much demand is there actually, and how much silver is actually sitting on the surface of the earth, and what are the supply demand fundamentals? And I was looking at the auto industry just the other day, and it's interesting. There's about 1.4 billion cars sitting on the surface of the earth. Last year, the stats, there was 2.4 million electric automobiles produced in a marketplace of just slightly shy of 100 million cars per year. So that's only 2.5 million electric cars of the 100 million. Now, Volkswagen, General Motors, all these automobile manufacturers are all claiming that they're going to stop producing fuel combustion cars. Cities are now talking about preventing fuel combustion cars to drive their streets by whatever date. Different cities are coming up with different dates. So this 2.4 million electric cars that are currently being produced is going to be a much, much bigger number. It's got to be in the tens of millions of cars a year just to meet these regulatory changes that are coming right in front of our eyes. So how much silver is that's going to consume? It's going to be in the hundreds of millions of ounces of silver. And when you're looking at a market, the miners are only producing 800 million ounces of silver a year. The solar industry is already taking over 100 million. Some numbers are as high as 200 million ounces in 2020. We don't know what the number is. So you've got two industries that are going to likely take half the world's supply of silver. What does that tell you about prices?
Right. So would that would be more of a market mover for you, Keith, than the people buying up all the silver coins?
The retail investor is kind of the marginal investor. They do kind of come and go. But interestingly enough, if you go back and look at 2011, that big spike from the $20 range to the $50 range, that was investor demand. That was big hedge funds, that was retail investor demand, and so on, and of course, then we had a short squeeze, which took it from 40 to 50. But that whole run from 20 to 35 was all investor demand. This time around, we're seeing investor demand, of course, we all know about it, but we're seeing commercial demand at the same time, which is new in the industry.
Interesting. Okay, so it's the newness here for you is commercial demand plus the investment demand that we haven't seen in, would you say, forever, Keith?
I think since the 80s, really, when the photographic industry kind of came offline and there was a bunch of supply left behind with no real buyer. And then computers came into being, in the 80s and then into the 90s and started gobbling up the supply. And now we've got, 30, 40 years of, pretty impressive demand. And there's just simply not enough silver around anymore.
Just to focus on the retail investor, though, Keith, this, as we've said, the investment demand has been unprecedented. Why do you think people are flocking to silver? Is it because they're afraid of a US dollar crash? Is it because it's an election year? Is it the social unrest we're seeing? Is it because people want silver to return as a monetary, currency? What is it?
Well, it's shiny. It looks great. It's beautiful to hold. I'm sure, many people that have held silver and gold in their hands, it gives you a very sense, a sense of value, a real warm feeling, and you can't get away from that feeling. And, at least I have, I love holding bars of silver in my hand. But I think it's all those things you mentioned, it's just I think people are waking up to the fact that, governments are just out of control, printing money, debasing currencies. And I think there's a view out there that there's something afoot and no one really knows what it is, because, the IMF, every once in a while puts out a couple of messages here and there. And, the variety of banks here and there, talk about, different types of resetting, what is is the U.S. going to lose their reserve currency status? All these kinds of things get floated in the marketplace, and we see the headlines. We're all in the mining sector, so we all read the same stuff. None of us really know what the financial situation is going to look like, 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now. But people are preparing for this change. We just don't know when it's going to happen.
Let's talk silver price now. Yes, silver has had a great run, but we're still halfway away from former highs of $50 an ounce. You have stuck your neck out with big bold calls of triple-digit silver over $100 an ounce. You've taken some slack for that. You've apologized in the past for saying like maybe you were wrong on timing, but you've never backed away from that call.
Yeah, I was, at least now people are actually joining the call, which is kind of nice. I felt like I was quite alone, 5 some odd years ago, because I did, when I put First Majestic together 18 years ago, I was expecting $50 silver, and it happened. It took 10 years, mind you. I didn't think it was going to take 10 years, but I didn't ever expect that silver prices were going to drop from $50 and go all the way back down to 13. That surprised me. But, as a result of my view and the supply demand fundamentals of the metal, and the fact that I look at silver as a very strategic metal, of course it's precious and it's and so on, but I look at it better. I think it's better than gold, because gold is great. It's the granddaddy of all currency. I think gold should be in everyone's portfolio, but silver is an extremely unique metal. Everything that we're doing as a human race requires silver. This call itself would not be possible without silver. People are waking up to that. And I think it's just going to have this enormous impact on price. When we see that, I don't know when it's going to happen, but I would expect to see that, whether it's the auto industry, whether it's the electronic industry, whatever industry may be, they're going to have to stop producing whatever product they're producing today because they can't get supply. And the second that happens, there's going to be huge demand coming into this marketplace. And the industry is so paranoid. I've said that, you've heard me say this before, but it's such a secretive industry. The big consumers, the auto manufacturers, the electronic manufacturers, they don't want us as investors to know how much metal they actually use. So the 3 service providers out there, CPM, Market, Metals Focused, and GFMS, they make up their numbers, because they have no clue how much silver Toyota consumes or Tesla consumes. They just make these numbers up. I think they're completely understated. If we found out how tight this market was actually, is actually today, metal prices would go up, 200-300%, and the Samsungs of the world would completely freak out. And they're trying to prevent that from happening. But at the end of the day, it wouldn't matter. Like a Samsung 12 or whatever, I think that's this newest Samsung, Samsung 20, S20. It's only got about $5 worth of silver in it anyway. So if silver's $200 an ounce, that phone's going to be what, an extra $20? Who cares? But these manufacturers don't want us to know.
I think you're going to be getting some emails from those research firms, Keith, but
I've been vocal against them for years, and they all hate me because of my views, and they think I'm a quack, and whatever.
All right. You say gold and silver are equal for you. You say you prefer, silver over gold. So if today I were to offer you $100,000 worth of gold and $100,000 worth of silver over here, all things equal, 100,000.
Yeah, I
Keith
like that.
Neumeyer chooses.
I'll take the silver. Oh, for sure. Look, gold, what's your target on gold? 3,000, 5,000, Rickards, calls 10,000 or 20,000, whatever the number is. But, even at 3,000, that's only 50% increase. 5,000, that's, basically a little bit of over a double, right? 125% or whatever. Silver at $100, that's 400%, $150.
So,
you do the math.
So what does Keith Neumeyer, CEO of First Majestic, do? Do you still buy silver? Or are you sitting pretty on your, I picture like you just have cases and cases of silver at home.
Well, you never have enough, right? You could always have more gold and silver, and I do have, but of course I'm a major shareholder of First Majestic and First Mining Gold, and I've got a portfolio of miners that that I'm close to as well. So, I'm all in, and I don't mind it that way. Of course, I've got other investments outside of mining, but most of my money is in the mining sector, and I'm comfortable that way. It's been tough, over the last 5 or 6 years. It's been a pretty tough period for all of us, but I think we're going to go into a major, major bull run here. I wouldn't be surprised to see a 10-year bull market coming up.
Well, I was going to ask you, when you say triple digit silver and you said you don't know when, I was going to ask you, do you think it's in our lifetime?
Back, a couple of times I've doubted that, and a couple of times I've actually questioned my own thesis or theories. And no, but I'm more convinced than ever. I just think that, you combine the what's happening with governments, the money printing, the fact that, it is a precious metal. So people do look at silver like gold, even though I don't really look at them the same. But just the supply demand fundamentals of the metal are just over the top. And
Keith, let's wrap with news from First Majestic. I know you just put out some results. With the silver price where it is right now, how has that changed for you? How has it changed life for First Majestic?
Well, not much yet. It's only been a quarter, basically. Go back in Q2, we didn't have particularly great metal price. We had 1 month in Q2 where we had silver over $20, and so we're getting used to this new regime. And you were going to say something?
No, I was going to say, I know. Well, you have a huge cash balance of over 200 million now, correct?
Oh yeah, no. Look, we're making money. Don't get me wrong, but when you say how has it changed the business, I'm. Just because I'm a bull on silver, and I think that we're going to have triple-digit silver prices, I'm still running a big company. I can't go and just spend capital for the sake of spending capital to build the business. I still have to make the same, smart decisions that I've made over the last, 18 years. So nothing changes, from that perspective. We still look for reducing our costs through productivity, through bringing new technologies into the business. We always look at our org chart to make sure that, we were not over bloated in certain areas of the business. We try to change the business as the business does change, because there's always lots of changes. The COVID stuff obviously has affected us a lot. So we've had to increase contractors and not rely so much on a number of employees who unfortunately are still not allowed to come back to work under the Mexican system. So, there's, we don't have enough time for me to babble on, but, maybe after a year of these kinds of metal prices, maybe things will change. Maybe I'll get a little bit more aggressive.
Well, how have, we've seen energy prices, drop substantially. So how has that helped?
Well, fortunately, one of our mines has been converted over to LNG. So it'll be our last mine that's actually consuming diesel. Of course, the vehicles consume diesel, but from a source of energy, 3 years ago, we had 2 mines that were actually producing from diesel. This one mine, we're going to save about $9 to $10 million a year just going over to LNG. So not only will we have a better environmental footprint, less pollution, but we won't, of course, we'll be saving a lot of money for ourselves and our shareholders. And we're always looking for ways of improving the business, and that's one of them. So
how about always looking for acquisitions?
That's a big, big thing, a big challenge always. We know the sector quite well, and you name a silver company, I've probably done work on it. And there's lots of new companies coming public, which is interesting. So, our M&A group is very active, looking at all kinds of stuff. And we could go buy a couple of gold mines tomorrow if we wanted to. And this goes back to what we talked about earlier. What would I rather have, gold or silver? I like both. Don't get me wrong. But silver is a lot rarer than people think it is, and I've also said on previous interviews that we're mining 8 to 1. So for every 1 ounce of gold we're only mining 8 ounces of silver. So show me a good silver mine.
All right. Maybe I will, Keith. But actually, you just touched a good point, and I just want to end with that. Is that the biggest misconception you would say for silver, that considering talking about how rare it is, that people think it's not rare? Is that a misconception? The biggest, you would say?
So. Yeah, and even on, I've listened to people that you've interviewed, in your old network, and there is, and I was listening to someone just the other day on another podcast I often listen to, and I think there is a perception that there is an abundance of silver sitting around. And I don't know where these perceptions come from, but we've tried to figure out how much commercial silver there is on the surface of the earth. And the highest number that you'll get is about 2 billion ounces. If you look at the ETFs alone, there's approximately 1 billion in the ETFs, but I believe a lot of that's fake silver. I think it's all paper silver. You listen to Eric Sprott, for example, and then the big ETFs increase their silver warehouse by 50 million ounces in a single week, which is impossible. You couldn't possibly do it. So how do they do it? They go into the derivative markets, they go to the paper markets. So that billion ounces sitting there is fallacy. So I would contend that there's only around 1 billion ounces sitting on their surface, and that's about a year and a bit worth of supply, and that's not very much silver.
Keith Neumeyer, I always appreciate your very candid conversations when it comes to silver. It's very refreshing. So thank you so much for joining me here today.
Well, it's a pleasure being invited on your new show, Daniela.
Thank you so much. And thank you for watching. We'll have much more for you. So be sure to stay tuned to Stansberry Research, and we're all on all the social media platforms, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We're all there. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Daniela Cambone.